Have you ever heard about nonverbal communication? Nonverbal communication was the first type of communication that exists before verbal language does. However, people have forgotten about the importance of nonverbal communication and how to control their nonverbal behaviors. According to Ursula, nonverbal communication includes all body language communication such as facial, vocal, and postural expressions, adornments such as styling and clothing, manners of using time, for example, knowing when to speak in a conversation, and spaces, for example, distances between people when they are interacting to each other. So we can say that nonverbal communication is the silent language, the things that we cannot communicate through words. Besides, there are some types of nonverbal communication, and Burgon in 2011 provides 6 types of nonverbal communication. The first one is kinesics, which refers to all body movements, postures, and positions of the body. Proxemics is defined as a communication that derives from spacing and distancing behaviors. For instance, the distance used between people when they are interacting and their position in relation to one another. Chronemics is regarding how we manage time, for example, knowing when to speak in a conversation. Calics is associated with a speaking tempo, short response, latencies, loudness, speaking initiation, interruptions, and proportions of the speaking time. Physical appearance refers to style, clothing and hairstyle, physiognomy, color skin, and so on. And finally, we have haptics, which refers to the wide forms of touching that we can use in order to communicate something, such as kisses, pats, kicks, and slaps.
Now that you have heard, recognize, and comprehend what is nonverbal communication and explore briefly several sorts of itself from our nerdy lady, it would be valuable to point out another dimension of what nonverbal communication entails in order to maximize our insights toward this concept. Yet, first ask yourself, how would it be remarkable and helpful becoming aware of how these nonverbal behavior signals are constantly delivered when holding an interaction, such as simple conversation with a parent? Well, can you remember an episode or momentum of your life in which you saw, let's say, a friend whose face gestures were indicating and reflecting a sad look, yet when asked about if everything was alright, and perhaps the response was an "I am fine" in a not convincing tone of voice, and after seeing this you felt and sensed the ambiguity between what is said and what can be actually seen in the body signals? That is a single sample of one of the sets of functions that nonverbal communication is comprised of, and this will be explored in the light of the findings made by some authors and highlighting only the most relevant for our purpose. First, Ekman and Friesen 1969 and Patterson in 1919, who recognized substitution as using a nonverbal action or cue instead of speaking. For example, instead of actually saying hi or bye, you might just wave a hand at someone. Contradiction as the use of nonverbal messages to negate the verbal message, such as when talking to someone whom you feel not being totally honest with his/her words because she has blushed after uttering apparently an excuse of any reason. Accentuation as the use of nonverbal cues to intensify the verbal message. For example, if you speak louder and quickly, you are adding intensity to the verbal message. Another perspective toward this definition of nonverbal communication is provided and listed by Capper in 2000, which are as follows. The first function he proposes is regulatory, when we engage in conversation with people of different linguistic, social-cultural backgrounds, keeping the conversation on track, which requires a lot of effort. Interpersonal function, which serves to express attitudes and emotions in interpersonal relations, also known as affect displays. Another one is emblematic function, which is largely the use of gestures to convey a specific message. The fourth function is illustrative function, used to indicate size, shape, distance, etc. And the fifth and last function is adaptive, which is used as a means of reassurance, self-comforting, often involving unconscious acts such as playing with hair, bird stroking, playing with a pencil, or cigarette.
As a conclusion, we consider nonverbal communication not only necessary for understanding communication beyond speech, but for the awareness in understanding the different cultures and becoming a competent intercultural communicator.